Welcome to Let's Try This Again.
Yeah.
This is night number 4, presentation number 4.
Yeah.
And we've been enjoying the time that we've been spending with you. Don't forget to like if you're watching on YouTube at Troy SDA Church. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. And definitely do not forget to subscribe if you have not already.
Yes.
So tonight we're going to be talking about a very important topic. What are we talking about tonight, Tamara?
We're going to talk about how change impacts our relationships. So change, right? And how it actually spills over into impacting how we deal with one another in our relationships. So full transparency, okay? My computer just froze, which has my document on it. And so I'm trying to get this to show up. So if any of y'all on here and y'all can pray, say a prayer that it unlocks because we need that for this evening. So do that. But we do know enough to know that change is an important topic because it's inevitable, right? I think we all can agree that change is nothing you can do to stop the train of change. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And not only can we not do anything to stop the change from happening, it's actually normal. There's nothing wrong with it. There is, I think we're going to get into a discussion tonight about some of the things that can present it as a challenge. But it is definitely a part of what we do in everyday life. From the moment that we were conceived in our mother's womb, we were changing. Okay. And so it is natural. But I can honestly tell you that it's not always something that I've enjoyed or that has felt good. What about you?
Yeah, it change doesn't always feel good. And one of the things that doesn't feel good about it is not necessarily personal.
Mhm.
It's about the people we're in relationships with.
Mm.
We don't want them to change,
Oh,
but they do. And they never seem to change in the way that
we
we
want
want
them
them
to
to change, when we want them to change, at the pace that we want them to change. And so, not talking about personal change, but change doesn't happen in the lives of people that we're in community or in relationship with
Mhm.
the way that we want it to. And that can be extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
It can create all sorts of challenges, and it can be downright painful sometimes
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. So I think one of the first stages that any of us could probably think about where we can consciously say, man, yeah, this change has a personal impact on me. I think it is the area where we go from dependence to independence.
Explain that.
So going from dependence to independence, I think the earliest stage of that is probably childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're born, it requires that somebody helps me.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot feed myself. I cannot dress myself. I can't even control, necessarily the parts of my body. And so I am literally dependent upon the mother and the father or the caregivers to do for me what I cannot do for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But you said there's a change from dependence to independence.
Oh,
Care to
yeah.
explain a little bit more
Yeah,
about that?
I remember just when we had our first son, there was parts of me that couldn't wait until he had some independence because Lord knows I needed some sleep and there was all these other things. But then I started noticing these changes where he didn't need me as much, right? Maybe he didn't need you as much either. He was able to get up
No,
on
he
his
didn't
own.
need me at all. Which, by the way, was a very interesting thing because
Oh, that was a change
um,
for us, huh?
there was the husband and wife relationship that we were just getting used to
That
and beginning
change.
to enjoy, and then all of a sudden, this third creature comes into the relationship, and this creature is, which is our son, is like magnetically attracted to my wife.
Hey,
But
I had the goods. That's
he
all I
really
can
doesn't
say.
care about me except for kicking me in the back, at night when we're sleeping. So there's a change
Yeah.
because for for the mother, especially in the beginning, is dependence. It is for a father. Yes, there's dependence.
Yeah.
You know, you need to be picked up, changed, bathed, and fed when you can do that. But in terms of needing me the same way he needed you, no.
Yeah, yeah. It
No.
was. Now, how did that feel?
Um, it was extremely challenging.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because it was the first relationship in my life that I got absolutely nothing from. So this child
Yeah.
that I don't get anything from, this child can't love me back. I mean, now don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful thing to be able to, it's a beautiful thing to be able to look at, um, uh, to be able to look at a newborn baby. It's a wonderful thing to be able to spend some time and to, um, to process this miracle of birth that's taking place and to figure out, do they look like me or do they look like you? And
Yeah.
look at their little fingers and toes. That's all fascinating and it's wonderful. But in the higher sense of relationship and getting something satisfactory or emotionally back that you give, there's no reciprocation.
Yeah.
Right. So I can say something to you and you can respond and we can reflect on that.
Mhm.
There is some sort of reciprocation. But for me as a father, he's not nursing, he's not nursing. And so I don't feel the connection that you feel and whatnot. And so it was a unique thing because I'm expected to give my time, my energy, and my effort
Mhm.
to a child that is not giving me
Mhm.
anything in a relational sense.
Yeah.
So it was a unique experience.
Yeah. And that changed the dynamic of our relationship, right? Where
Mhm.
we were already going through a change of one being individuals and the two people now becoming one. So I think that was definitely
I need to
a change.
I need to make a change.
Okay. So again, we're talking about change and the impacts that have on us, right? And so change is normal and it is natural, but it does not mean that we always understand it. It doesn't mean that we always know how to rightly interpret it as well. And so we are talking about that tonight. And one of the first stages of change that we end up experiencing are going from dependence to independence. And so when we had our first son, that was our first experience with what that is like. And he was once clinging to us and needed us for everything. Now he's 20, about to be 21 years old. And that is definitely an adjustment, watching our children go from that stage to where they no longer need us for certain things. Do any of you guys recall when you remember that experience, how you felt when your child no longer needed you to help them, to feed them? They wanted to feed themselves, or they no longer needed you to pick out their clothes and dress them. They actually became independent of you. That can be a huge, huge challenge, right? So that's one stage, going from adolescence into maybe
Seamlessly
teenage.
slide back
You
in.
sure did. You just and so being able to experience that change. But then it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there, right? The change continues with them. We've been there. We went from being babies, toddlers, adolescent, maybe preteen, teen, and now maybe in high school or out of high school off to college and or maybe just a profession.
Yeah, and I think even before that, definitely that is legit, that's authentic. But even before that,
Mm-hmm.
there's this time when if you I used to work uh, in a daycare slash kindergarten, and I remember children when they would be dropped off the first day, and they would literally be clinging to their parents. And 3 or 4 years later, mom and dad are trying to give them a hug, and they're like, I don't want you to hug me in front of anybody, right? So there's this transition, like you talked about, from being dependent to becoming independent, and that only grows.
Yeah.
It only grows for the child, the individual that's being cared for. And make no mistake about it, some sometimes we as parents are eager for for them to grow up too. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I can't wait till they walk. Oh, I can't wait till they run. Oh, I can't wait till they go to school. Oh, I can't wait till they go off to college. Oh, I can't wait till they get out of the house so I can be an empty nester. So there's all of that. And there can be, I think this is important, there can be tension during those times. There can be tension between two people who are experiencing change. As caregivers, having to let go and not really necessarily wanting to in all ways, shapes, and forms. And also as the recipients of care, wanting to be allowed a little bit more freedom,
Yeah.
or a lot more freedom than you were used to. And so, yeah, those are some tense times and some tense situations going back and forth between dependents and independents.
The story that comes to my mind is the story of Jesus and his parents, right? Must have been a very interesting here. Is in Luke chapter 2, where Jesus is out, a young boy, and his parents are used to having this type of, I don't know, is it safe to use the word control? Do you think?
Yeah.
They're used to having this type of control. They're used to having this type of hold, right, on him, and they can't find him. Right? Where is he? And so when they finally come into contact with him, I imagine in my imagination, I'm thinking they're freaking out like, oh my goodness, like, geez, where are you? Now it's kind of weird thinking of them talking to him like that. But again, this is their child as well, right? And they're like, Jesus, where are you? And Jesus replies and says, hey, and in my terms, you would say, I must be about my Father's business, right? Basically, I'm off. I'm doing the things that I need to do, that I'm called to do, that I feel confident that I'm supposed to do. So that's where I am. And how do you think they felt about that? Or do you think that's an easy response to receive as a parent?
No, it's not an easy response in any way, shape, or form to receive. But I think what they recognize is that the train is moving in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that we can do to stop it. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to turn this train around. There's nothing we're going to be able to do to slow down the process that has already begun. We're moving there, and it's going that direction. And I think a lot of us have experienced people that we're in relationship with who are going through change, and we come to that same realization. Now, they're not always being about their Heavenly Father's business. They're not always going to their Father's house.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're going the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But it becomes as evident to us as it did to Jesus' earthly parents that, this is going a certain direction and I can't stop it.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do.
So it's a semblance of relinquishing or surrender, right? You have to surrender. What's the term? I know they use it is it AA, or maybe I'm mixing something up, but when you come to the realization that I realize I cannot change, right, another human being, that I cannot change a circumstance, I can't change the past, right? And so what I end up having to do, or individual, I have to surrender them, to God. And I think that was symbolic of what it is that they had to do, even though that was their child, that God had entrusted them to raise him, that they had to trust God, with him as well. So that is that returning over. Now, I would admit, I don't think that that's always the easiest thing to do, but I would say probably is the best thing to do, because myself trying to control my child's direction, that's never really going to work,
Yeah, and by the way, it's not only children that we attempt to control.
Oh,
We attempt to control. We can attempt to control pretty much everyone that we care about.
have
And
mercy.
it's a natural thing to try to control people that you care about.
Yeah.
Because if I can control you, I can protect you.
But no, I'm not trying to control. I'm just trying to tell you.
Yeah. If I can control you, I can protect you. And I
Yeah.
can keep you safe. and I can keep you away from hurt, harm, or danger.
Yeah.
And I can, I can keep you safe.
Yeah.
And so if I always know where you are, and if I, have a tether on you, and I can keep track, and I know, every waking moment what you're doing,
Yeah.
then that helps me to protect you. And so I think everybody deals with that. I've had the I was going to say the privilege, but it's not always a privilege. I've had the opportunity to see spouses who are caring for their loved ones, children who are caring for their parents, who are dealing with dementia. And those parents can no longer be trusted to just care for themselves in the way that they did previously. And the spouses can't be trusted to go outside and take a walk, because they'll walk down the street and they'll forget where they are, and they'll be totally lost, and they become afraid, and they panic, and so forth. And so it's something that's very real, not just for parents, but for every one of us that will experience at some point in life.
In every stage of life. Wow. Are there any of you guys who've experienced that? I'm glad you brought that up, that switch of that, the child being taken care of and now becoming the caregiver of your parent, right? Or caregiver of someone who is, taking care of you, and now you're in that position, and then watching that person deteriorate, maybe mentally or physically. I imagine that is a difficult, experience to go through, that change,
Yeah, it is.
It is. I wanted to go back to the transition from being a teenager or, coming into young adulthood. And specifically, I wanted to speak to the change that Christian young men or women may go through. Or maybe it's just, maybe it's not just Christian young men or women. Maybe it is those who come from living a certain type of life, right? You grow up in a home where they have certain values, you know what I'm saying, and certain ways that you do things. And then you leave from that environment. I've been there. Maybe you've been there as well. And you have to then contend with the reality that I'm living between two worlds, right? Two worlds, meaning this is the way we did things. And we talked about this week, culture, right? The culture of our homes. This is the way that I've done things and I've lived, and this is how we eat. And this is what we do, what day we, all these different things. And now I am in a place where nobody thinks like me. I'm working at a job or going to school with people who don't have the same convictions that I have. And it can be rather difficult. Have you had that experience before?
Yeah, I think everyone has that experience.
Yeah.
And this is something that I want to point out. We started by saying that change is normal, it's natural, it's a part of life. Well, having this experience is also normal, natural, and it's a part of life. And every one of us, I think, deals with this in some way, shape, or form. I think we looked at a statistic that said that freshmen who are entering into college, up to 75%,
50 to 75,
will ultimately change the course of study or change the major that they entered in with. So they'll say, okay, this is what I'm studying. This here is what I am. This here is what I'm all about, and I want to do this. And then they take their first couple of courses, and they're like, no, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And that's expected.
Yeah.
That's expected, because it is, again, it's a normal part of the experience. It's a normal step in the process of change.
Now, a word that you just used that actually is not used often, that we don't talk about enough, is expected. Now, how many young people actually have the conversation with someone that tells them you're going to change? Right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
If it's actually normal and natural, and it actually is a part of life, and yet we don't really have that conversation a lot, that you're going to change, whether it's you're going to change what you may have been wanting to be a firefighter since you were 3, but now you're 20 something years old and you've decided, man, matter of fact, I'm going to give you an example. We talked about this earlier. I remember I just knew I wanted to be a doctor. I knew I loved, and I still kind of to this day like going on YouTube and watching little gory surgeries. I don't know why. I just like stuff like that. Right. But I was convinced that that's what I wanted to do ever since I was little. And I remember one time my mom was in school for nursing and stuff like that, right? And I would get her books and I would look through her books and I was just fascinated, you know? So I ended up going to a particular school for that particular bent of career. It was what you would call a magnet school, right? We had a connection with Cleveland Clinic. And I was excited. We got to wear, do all kind of little dissectings, and we actually got a chance to go into a live surgery. All of the students that were part of this program, we got to wear, the white coat, and we were sitting above in the glass area, being able to look down. And I remember the first time I walked in and I saw the person wheeled out, and it was just like, oh my goodness, this is like, I don't know if they had TV shows back then. They probably didn't, but I felt like I was a part of one. And lo and behold, they began to do the surgery. I had no idea that it was going to be an open heart surgery, right? And I'm looking down, peering down, and I see them take like the thing and start cutting the person's, what is this called? The sternum. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. You know what I'm saying? It's all right. I've seen stuff. But then they took this thing out that looked like a car jack. And that's what threw me. Like, I was not expected for this little hookup, literally like a car jack, and they put it on his chest, and then they start cranking this thing, and I heard the crack of the chest. When I heard it, I felt like I think I almost probably blanked out or something, and I ended up running out the room. Mm-hmm. Now, the person who was supposed to be our person who's helping us, she came out, she said, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I don't know, I want to go," and luckily our school was still close to the hospital, so I was done. Mm-hmm. I made a decision that day that I was finished. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, the expectation, right? No one had a conversation with me about the in-depthness of this particular surgery. And no one actually sat with me later and had a conversation about, like, that there are, okay, no worries. That there are other areas of medicine, right? I was just honed in on that. And so therefore my expectations were dashed, and I made a decision based off of an unexpected event. You know what I'm saying? Like a change. I made a shift. What would you say? That was abrupt, right?
Yeah, it was abrupt, but if that's a normal part of the process that we're talking about when it comes to dealing with change, we need to remember, and if we're honest, most of us have kind of been coached up not to change.
That's true.
We've been coached up, don't forget where you came from. Don't this, don't that, don't the other. And so as a result, we are fixated on remaining the same. And so when we change, it feels like, or when we're even thinking or processing about it, we feel like, it's man, okay. I've disappointed. Right. I've disappointed someone, or, this is a bad thing in order for me to do what you did, which is to decide, I don't think I want to go in this direction anymore. But it's a normal, natural part of our growth and maturation experience. And I think because it's not expected and because we don't talk about it,
yes,
what happens is people can come in and they get the opportunity to, what's the word I'm looking for? They get the opportunity to
direct
or to define,
influence,
or to define,
yeah,
or to define what it is that we're going through.
Yeah.
So the change process that I'm going through becomes definitive,
yes,
for who I am, right? And so it's a sad thing because a lot of us we're just not sure.
Yeah.
We're still processing. Am I going to go this way? Am I going to go that way? Let me try this. Let me try that.
Yeah.
But because we're not prepared and because we don't expect it, people can come in and they can make that definitive and they can begin to interpret that experience.
That's
they can
true.
say, oh, you don't want to go, you wanted to go this way, but now you want to go that way. Here, let me tell you what this means.
Wow.
Let me tell you what this means. This now means this. And for a person who's unexpected of that, it's like, oh,
that's
wow,
what I'm
going through. Like I never suspected. I never, I never knew this. I never heard of this. And so it's actually quite a challenging thing.
Yeah.
When we don't prepare people
yes,
to deal with change, when we don't prepare people to expect change.
Yeah. That's it's amazing, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's something that, especially in this day and age, we're dealing with a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where people are dealing with the aspects. Matter of fact, I love the story of Moses. I think it's Moses Exodus chapter 2, right? And it talks about how he grew up. It says one day after Moses had grown up, right, and because he was actually aware that he was a Hebrew. He was, we can't listen to the movie, what I'm saying? He knew exactly where he came from, who his mother and his father were, and his people were. And he was also dually being raised, right? And in an Egyptian, household, I guess you could say. And so he was actually experiencing this duality of life, meaning, I understand these things and these principles, but I also am here. And he understood to a certain degree his identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are with a young person who is having to go through, man, okay, yes, these are the things that I know. I know who I am. I know where I come from. I know what we stand for. I know what our culture, meaning the things that are important to us as a family and our faith. And yet here I am also having to exercise, right? Living in a palace with people who are idol worshipers, or who don't think the way I think, who don't look the way I look. I imagine that was very a challenge for him. And then on top of that, he experiences something one day. And I like how you put it. We were talking earlier about how he found himself making a mistake, right? That he got angry when he saw two of the gentlemen, fighting and arguing. And when he tried to, take care of it, he got mad, and he ended up killing the Egyptian. And they watched it and they saw that, so they came to a conclusion, right? Based on something that happened. But when he tried to address it, or, try to address them, what did they say to him?
They said, who made you a ruler over us? You're going to kill us like you did the Egyptian.
Right.
Yeah. And that's fascinating, because here he is trying to walk in what he feels is his purpose.
Yeah.
And as he tries to walk in what he feels is his purpose, the people are like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
This is not where you're supposed to be, right? And it would be the equivalent in my mind of a person who begins to take a particular course of study, and maybe they don't do well on the first quiz or test or whatever.
Yeah.
And you have an impatient individual who's like, maybe this is not the course for you.
Ooh.
Maybe you need to go a different direction.
Yeah.
Or you come to your job and you start doing your job and you don't do exceptionally well because you're just learning it.
Yeah.
And somebody comments to you like, man, you're not going to last here long because X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, again, all of us experience change. We should expect it. Change, although it is normal and natural, it is not always easy.
Yeah.
But we should not allow people to become interpreters of what it is that we're going through.
Yeah.
Don't allow people to define, well, if you're going through this, this is what it means.
Yeah.
And what do I mean when I say that? Because I think I need to get a little bit more, we need to get a little bit more plain and practical here.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I'm feeling, sometimes people go through what's referred to as a midlife crisis. Oh. And it's like, man, I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable, like my life is missing something. And if you allow somebody to interpret that, oh, I know what you're going through. You need a new wife.
Oh, have mercy.
Oh, I know what you're going through. You need a new husband. Oh, I know what you're going through. You need a fast sports car. I know what you're going through. You need to spend money like it's going out of style.
Yeah.
I know what you're going through. You need to do. And people become interpreters telling us, and we're like, oh, maybe you're right.
Yeah.
Maybe this is what I need.
Yeah.
Right. But when we expect change, then it doesn't catch us off guard, but we're only wondering, okay, how can I process through this? What's the best way for me to process through this?
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to relationships, since we going there right now, when it comes to relationships, and this is what's unique, is because when I'm going through my change, normally I'm in relationship with someone, either it is family or it's my coworkers or friends.
Yeah.
And they're kind of watching what's going on. When I'm going through my change, this is how most people interpret. Most people will interpret our change to mean that the people around us somehow need to change so that they can alleviate whatever it is that we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to suggest this evening that when that change process is taking place, that it is actually me as an individual who needs to go through the change process. So it's not that I need to switch wives. It's that I just need a mind or a heart change.
Yeah.
Right. I need a new perspective on my life. I need a
Yeah.
new perspective on, what am I supposed to do now in life? Oh, I've been doing X for 25 years, but it doesn't do what it used to do for me. And maybe that's an inclination that I should switch directions. Now, you and I were talking earlier about the pandemic and what the pandemic did for a lot of us. Why don't you explain a little bit about what we were talking about?
The pandemic, I think, is something that we still have not recovered from. The pandemic was a large mass worldwide change that happened all at once at the same time for every single person on the face of the planet. Maybe to varying degrees, for sure. We cannot deny that. But what we have to acknowledge is that there was a change in our world, right? And that I can say wasn't normal. I think we all can admit that was not normal.
Once in a century, once every 100 years.
Right. It was 1918 was the last, so it was not normal. And so therefore, this wasn't what you would call an extra, right? Or abnormal type of change. And when abnormal change comes or takes place, we don't always have the tools we need to be able to process through it because we're not prepared for it. You know what I'm saying? And so I believe that this pandemic propelled a lot of people, whether it was individuals, families, cities, towns, countries, into making decisions that they otherwise probably would not have made, or decisions they were thinking about making but wasn't really sure when to do it. Or maybe I didn't even know I needed that. I didn't even know I needed to change, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that in the realms of the pandemic.
There's too many layers for us to go into all of them. But I think certainly one that you brought up is people who were thinking about the need to change. Yeah. But, we're comfortable in our routines.
Yes.
And we don't like change.
Yeah.
We don't like the discomfort that comes along with something that's unknown.
We will even fight.
Unusual.
I'm going to tell you how deep change is. We will fight. We will kill. Right. In order to not have to change, for no disruption, right, to take place in our lives.
And that's one of the reasons why in the biblical account, you find, even though the children of Israel have been freed from Egyptian bondage and they're on their way to the promised land, you will find that they are constantly asking to go back to Egypt.
Yes.
Now you hear them say some foolish stuff like, "Oh, we had it good back there. Oh, it was better back there. Oh, it was this, that." But you're the same people who were crying to get out. And so the reality is not that Egypt was actually better, but Egypt they were more familiar with.
And familiarity.
So that familiarity was what was comfortable to them, not necessarily what was best for them.
Yeah.
But the pandemic, I think, it put people who were normally in the office who would say to themselves, "Man, I need to spend more time with my family. Man, I need to spend more time with my family." And now they found themselves spending that time with their family. And they were like, wow, this is what I've been missing out on. Now, it's two sides.
Now, there was two sides to that. Before we talk about that, I want to read this comment. How do you click there? Let's see here. Vivine says, what if when you change, you shut down? Once you shut down, sometimes it takes a while to reset. How do you come back without hurting others? And I think we're actually going to talk about that in the end, right? Talk about some of the things that we can do to help deal with change. So stay tuned, Vivine. We're gonna get to that, okay? But what we're talking about is these two different responses, right? That we saw that happened during the pandemic that a lot of people experience. When it comes to families, individuals, right, who are in the realm of being with other people, you had one reply or one response to the pandemic, which took away their normalcy and caused them to spend a lot more time with people that they otherwise were not spending time with. You had some people whose reflection was, wow, I really hate this. Like literally, some people were like, I can't stand it. Like, what am I going to do? I'm with these people.
Work was actually my reprieve from you.
Yes, right? So people missed being able to get away from their family.
Let me give you a third.
Yeah.
Some people who were forced to stay at home were forced to confront their loneliness.
Oh, yes.
Because either they did not have healthy relationships,
Yeah.
or they were reminded of the loss
Yes.
of a relationship.
Yeah.
And so the pandemic brought out that dynamic as well.
Yeah. So you have that. And then you have the people who have a family, but they really didn't spend a whole lot of time with them. And the pandemic brought this gap that was in their life together. And they're like, I can't take it. Then you have the other perspective. People who had not spent a whole lot of time together. And now there was nothing stopping them. And they're like, wow, this is what it's like to enjoy my family. Like they really enjoyed all of this time that they had with people that they knew, right? But they discovered they really didn't know each other. So there were people who actually were awakened to something else during that changed, caused them to actually change their perspective, right? And so.
And then your job said, now you got to come back in and work. And for some people, that was salvation. It was redemption. It was like yes. Redemption draweth nigh. And for other people, it was a devastating blow because it's like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to that. I knew I wanted change prior to it, but I was hesitant to embrace it or to go after it. And now that I've experienced what I've experienced, I don't want to change again and go back to something that was unhealthy for me.
We had a friend share with us a couple of days ago that on their job that happened. But this was what happened. They went to their job and there was like a revolt. Like people were like, I'm quitting. Coming back, and they were only coming back for a couple of days a week, but they literally just felt this overwhelming heaviness, right? Of coming back into an environment that again brings about a change, correct? So the pandemic really exposed a lot more about us. Let's talk about career shifts, right? Talking to a friend again, who during the pandemic, there was a mingling of these two things for them. They said that they had they had been contemplating a change. They had served in one career path for a certain amount of time, for so many years. That's what they went to college for. That's what they got their degree in. And this is what they did. But they had started contemplating after so many years that what would it be like to do something different? I no longer have joy, right? Doing this particular job. And so, but when the thoughts would come to them thinking about change, what did they say that they experienced?
Well, they were comfortable.
They thought to themselves like, well, this job, I know how to get here every day. The route don't change. The people, right? What would it be like if I leave these particular people? I kind of know what to expect from boss so-and-so or these team members. I know their personalities. So to change and get to know new people, who wants to really deal with that, right?
As you're sharing this about the pandemic and some of the things that happened, one of the things that popped into my mind is, and we suggested that one of the reasons we're uncomfortable with change is familiarity. But another reason popped into my mind, and that is that we've had negative experiences in our lives with change before. And you think about for a child who has to move several times as they're growing up.
Oh yeah.
And they develop friendships, and just as they're developing these friendships, they move. They go to another place, they develop more friendships, and just as they get to know these people, they move again. And this happens over and over and over again. So there's literally a bad taste in the mouth of this now adult who has experienced change, but it's always been negative.
Yeah.
Or change in the form of parents who were divorced. We had a great family. We had wonderful memories. We took vacations. We did this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, one day, mom and dad split, and we had to spend some time over here and some time over there.
Yeah.
Man, that's a traumatic and a painful change.
Yeah.
And so when we have had experiences in our lives that have been negative and have left a bad or sour taste in our mouths, it's no wonder that so many of us are affected the way we are by change. And it's not just that we've had these experiences, because really being a human being living on planet Earth is par for the course that we have experiences with change. The problem is, the challenge is that we are not helped to process through those changes. Now, I just happen to be in a profession where, change is one of those things. And
it's like military family, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we've adopted and we've begun to do is just leave it alone, babe.
Okay.
One of the things that we've adopted and we've tried to do is we try to have conversation with our children.
Yeah.
Hey, look, this is an opportunity for us to move from here to there. What do you think about it? What will some of the challenges will that be?
Yeah.
What do you think about your relationships? Will you still be able to maintain? Do you think? And as we process through and allow them to be a part of the decision-making process, so it's not just,
arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary, dad is gonna, so we gotta go, mom is gonna, so we gotta go, and we don't have any say or we don't have any choice. We're uprooted from, the things that we love, and we're uprooted at random, and we really don't understand it, and we don't really have any discussion about it.
Yeah.
So we've tried to discuss and communicate with our children to help to be able to, to help them to be able to process, so that change is not as, as unhappy a circumstance for them as it could be.
Yeah. It is also something that I've discovered too, even in our own experience, as you talked about your occupation, we do move a lot, as ministry families. I have discovered or have developed a heart for those who go, whether it's military, missionary, ministry families, right? Where you're called to go out, right? And do ministry at various different places, no matter where it is. And granted, even though you still have that choice, right? But that is also your call, so it's always a grapple. But one of the things that I think that does not happen enough is that we don't sit down and process through these calls, and we don't process through what it's going to take, right? We assume that children, and I've heard this said so many times, that children bounce back. Oh, don't worry about them.
They're resilient.
They're resilient. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh, trust me, they'll be all right. It's about you. You need to do what makes you happy. Those kids are going to be all right. And it's like, no, children actually are not resilient. Children just learn how to cope. Right. So that is a myth. That is a lie. Children learn how to cope. And oftentimes they learn how to cope based on how they see us cope. Right. So if I'm not talking about life changing or how I'm experiencing it or how I feel or how I'm processing it, they're not going to learn. Don't expect your child to have these open, deep conversations about their thoughts and feelings when mom and dad don't really even talk about.
So if my coping mechanism is an unhealthy level of anxiety and fear, and worry, then what I'm doing is I'm actually teaching my children that this is how you deal with change. If my coping mechanism is, Michelob Ultra, or whatever you're drinking, or smoking something, or popping pills,
or eating.
If these are my coping mechanisms, then what I'm doing is I'm teaching my children this is how you deal with change,
or anger,
or how you cope with change, or if anger, anger and frustration. I'm throwing stuff. I'm even if the change happened at my job and I got fired or I got demoted or something happened that I didn't like, I come home and I act up. I act up. Or if it was at school and I'm a kid, because I'm talking to young people now and we don't know what happened. You come home and you're upset and you're throwing your books around or you're getting a smart mouth. Like there's these things, because we don't have the vocabulary, which is so important, right? The emotional vocabulary of it all. And I don't know about you, but we often talk about this. I know that my parents weren't given again, I always have to retract that. They were given a vocabulary, but it wasn't a whole and healthy vocabulary. Yeah. And that ends up being trickling down, and neither was I given one. And so you give what you've been given. Yeah. And I think it's important. I think we tried to touch on this earlier, but I just want to touch on it again. And that is that when we are going through change, it has a tremendous effect upon our relationship. Yeah. In fact, most conflicts can arise when you have people who are dealing with change, but they don't have the language to be able to articulate what it is about their experience that has them flustered or frustrated. And as a result of that, you have two people who are dealing with change, sometimes living in the same house or part of the same family. Yes. But we can't articulate that it's the change that's making us uncomfortable. It's the change that has us on edge. It's the change that has us moody or
Yes.
snappy or whatever the case may be. So whenever conflict arises, that's one of the things that we can sit down and ask ourselves, what has changed?
Yes.
What has changed? Has there been any drastic change in my life that's causing or that's unsettling me?
Man, and God help us when we don't even realize we've experienced change. Listen, there are plenty of us on the planet who are just going through life, right? And because we've never stopped and had anyone ask us, or we've never asked, and we just don't know what that looks like or feels like, we can be experiencing change in our lives. And because we just don't have that capacity or that knowledge of what that looks like, because to us, change, I'm gonna give you an example. Another word for change would be death.
Death.
Right? Now, a lot of people would hear that and say, well, yeah, I get that change. But you know that there's a lot of other areas of change that people don't consider to be right that important. What are some that you can think of?
You know, I think so. My wife got a guinea pig when I was out of the country one time, and this guinea pig, my children and my wife loved the guinea pig. The guinea pig tested me, and the guinea pig chewed up my computer cord.
But that was out of love. That wasn't personal.
We were getting ready to move, and we couldn't take the guinea pig with us where we were moving. And so I arranged, you know, for the guinea pig to go to
I like how you use that word.
To a better place.
And
there was a family that had massive space, and they had, you know, created these obstacle courses for the guinea pig and whatnot. So my family and I went there, we drove there, and we handed over the guinea pig, and the guinea pig's name was Penny.
Penny,
and
y'all.
They, you know, I'll never forget my children's response. They were just like, "Oh, Dad, you know what?" And I'm like, "Why are y'all tripping?" You know, it's a guinea pig. Now, I didn't have a well, I guess I kind of had animals growing up, but not to the extent that most people did.
Yeah.
And as a result, I wasn't understanding what the big deal was, but they were unsettled because something had changed.
Yeah.
They loved this little guinea pig. And so losing the guinea pig was a change for them.
Yes.
So that's also something that we don't really generally, we don't process it the way that we should.
I'm gonna name a few things, okay?
Go ahead.
Just to give you a broader scope of what change can look like, all right? So we have divorce or breakup, loss of faith, trust, or safety. That
loss of faith.
Come on. We're gonna come back to that in a minute. Hold on. Chronic illness, betrayal, weight changes, whether you gain weight or lose weight, bankruptcy or foreclosure, or you actually come upon a large sum of money. I would prefer that one as opposed to the latter, but
it's still a
natural disasters, potential loss of a loved one, release of care of a loved one, pet loss, rehoning of a pet, leaving a religion, change of belief, abuse of any kind, estrangement, job or career change, kids going off to college, kids coming back home from college, empty nester, all kind, retirement. These things are change.
Yeah. I want to touch on, because we don't have a lot of time, but
oh my goodness, we could talk about this all night.
I want to touch on, and our conversation is about how change affects us individually and how it affects the relationships that we're in.
Yeah.
I want to touch on that loss of faith.
Yes.
Because, loss of faith. Remember, we suggested earlier that when we don't expect change, we can allow people to interpret what it is that we're experiencing. And that change that they have interpreted can then become definitive for us when it doesn't need to be. And
defensive, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
So there's something that people talk about, and it's called deconstruction.
Yeah.
It's called deconstruction. And that is where, basically I'm breaking down my belief system, ultimately to see if I still want to believe it. I cannot tell you how many people I've heard make statements like this. Well, I raised them and I brought them to church. Well, I tried to do the best that I could, and they know all of the this, that, and the other. They were in, Sabbath school or Sunday school, and, they came to church and they were in this club and that club and so forth and so on. And while all of that is true,
Mhm.
and it is extremely important for children to experience that, we cannot fool ourselves into believing that a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old has the same questions that a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old has.
Yes.
And so a lot of times that change is simply them questioning. Hey, and questioning, there's nothing wrong with questioning,
No.
because questioning doesn't necessarily mean that I'm rejecting.
Yes.
Isaiah chapter 1, verse 18 says, come now, let us
reason
reason together.
Yeah.
Right? And so questioning is not bad.
Mhm.
But if I'm telling you that the answers you learned when you were 5 and 6 years old should be good for you at 35 years old,
Mm-mm.
well, they're going to be like, well, that doesn't, I don't know if that makes sense. And then again, remember, there are those who are willing to say, hey, I know what you're experiencing, and interpret that and say, you don't believe anymore.
Right.
That's what your issue is. You just don't believe.
And
when
this-
in reality, they just have questions. Go ahead.
And I think that is such a dangerous precedent to set as a parent. And I've had to really check myself about that. Because when we tell people that when they have questions that they're being disrespectful, when they have questions that they are actually disputing my worth as a parent, or did I not raise you right? Are you questioning? No, it is that they have reached a place in their life where the answers, right, need to mature.
Yes.
And it's not because the answers aren't there biblically. It is that even we need to mature at how we disseminate that information that is given to us in scripture, right?
Yeah.
To be able to meet people where they are. And I really feel strongly about this is because I feel like this is the chasm for that. A heart that is finding itself at a place where it is questioning and it feels like it's lost its faith. God is no way intimidated by that at all whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
We are to love people even at that place in their life where they don't even know if they believe that there is a God anymore, because the God of the universe is more than able to reveal himself again to a soul that is allowed to question, right? That is allowed to be loved in spite of that. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to draw away from. Now, I'm not saying if a person's walking towards a bridge, jump off the bridge, right? But what I am saying is this, is that we should draw close to that person and allow them that space, even within our presence. But I think sometimes the reason why we don't is because we're afraid we don't have the answer. Or we're afraid that they are somehow questioning.
Or the change that they're experiencing somehow defines our value or worth.
Maybe I didn't do enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and so I think that is a dangerous place to be as a parent. I think it's a dangerous place to be as a group of believers. And if we find ourselves in a greater, context, that I think people need room, you know what I'm saying, to wrestle with God.
Yeah. And it's wonderful that we've had the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
And tell people, listen, go on your journey. And we're here with you.
Yeah, we're here with you.
We love you. We're going to love you as you're going through that journey.
Yeah.
And if there's any way we can help, we're here. And we've seen those individuals who have been on that journey, who have actually come right back to where we believe they need to be. Well, listen, another change is here. And that change is actually the time for us to leave.
I know.
So
listen, I want to tell you guys, if any of you have been watching tonight, the thing that we've been talking about is grief. It's just another word for change. And if you are a person who's still processing through the pandemic, if you're a person who's going through any of the stuff we talked about, your child growing up and feeling like you don't need them, they don't need you anymore, you're thinking about a career change, or you're going through these things where you've had some losses, listen, you're not alone. All right. I just want to let you know that there are resources that are out there. If you have any questions or would like to be introduced to something that can help you process through any of these changes and the grief and loss that you've gone through, you can go to our website, which is www.staminaforlife at staminaforlife.com. And that's STAMENA, the number 4, and then LIFE.com. That's Stamina for Life. And there are resources there that can help you to process through the grief and changes of life. All right. Yeah.
All right.
And he's putting it in the chat, I believe. He's putting it right down in the chat.
A couple of things that just we'll let you go, but we want you to acknowledge change.
Yes.
We want you to expect change.
Yes.
We want you to be patient as you are going through change and as others in your lives are going through change, and we want you to exercise wisdom.
Yes.
Wisdom as you deal with others, and wisdom as you process through your own change.
Yeah.
All right. God bless
Let's
you. Let's pray. Let's bow our heads together. Father God, thank you for the opportunity we've had to spend some time together talking about change. Oh, it's a very real thing from the beginning of Scripture all the way to the end. And the end suggests that there will be a massive change, one the likes of which this earth has never seen. I pray, dear Lord, that we would acknowledge, expect, that we would have patience, and that we would exercise wisdom as we process through what is normal and natural for us to experience, and that is change. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.